Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming for our Sunday afternoon artist talk with Stephen Malloy Desormeaux. I never have said his last name because we all call him Steve MD.
That works.
So today he's going to show us 3 projects that he's been working on and go through lots and lots of photographs, which I love. I love seeing pictures. And just to point out, he has been volunteering with our photo club program for over 10 years, and he's a solid volunteer. Always shows up, wonderful help, and the kids absolutely adore him. So thank you for that, Steve.
I love doing it. It's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things. So, I'm Steve. It's Malloy Desormeaux. You did a real good job on the pronunciation. So my interest in photography started about 12 years or so ago as a serious hobby. And I'm pretty much self-taught. Before that, I was all math and science and engineering and things in school. My connection to the art center started about 10 or 12 years ago too, when I took one of Bruno's classes in, I think it was Snapshot, the series about shooting projects, shooting series. And that had a big lasting impact on me because as a result, I mostly shoot long-term projects now. I'm not much of a single image photographer, I guess. I really like how images work together. So, and as Juliana mentioned, I also been volunteering for about 10 years or so in the photo club, which is, I really love. So, oops, why isn't this advancing? Here we go. I love photo books. I buy lots of photo books and I like making photo books of projects, and I've made about a dozen so far. The ones, mostly I make kind of traditional ones, like most of the ones on the left, but in the last few years I've been making some photo zines, like 4 or 5 of the smaller ones on the right. Photo zines have a different aesthetic than traditional photo books. They're more informal. Sometimes you hear them referred to as the punk rock of photo books. Although like punk rock, they've gotten a lot tamer as they've become more mainstream. And I wouldn't put mine in the punk rock category, at least not yet. I'm still have aspirations for that. But so I thought today I'd go through, why isn't this advancing? Okay, so I thought I would go through 3 of the projects. I'm sorry, my keyboard isn't working. 3 of the projects that I've done and show kind of excerpts from those. So the first one is Glimpsing Edgemere, I call it. Eileen and I used to occasionally talk about going and living along the water. So one day we decided to go explore and photograph one of the lakefront neighborhoods along Lake Ontario. And so this neighborhood is west of Rochester near Long Pond. The homes are located on Old Edgemere Drive, which not to be confused with Edgemere Drive. Edgemere Drive's the highway you're probably familiar with. Old Edgemere Drive's a little 1-lane road about 50 yards north of the highway, along which these houses are all located. So this area has an interesting history that has nothing to do with palm trees, by the way, but in the early 1900s, there was a trolley that went from the city in Charlotte to Manitou Beach, where there was a resort areas, hotels and resort places. In fact, Old Edgemere Drive, where we're walking, is the site of the trolley. And so this part of the beach is called Crescent Beach, and it's about 100 years ago, there was some hotels and some summer cottages and fishing shacks along here. And then in the 1970s, they built the highway, Edgemere Drive, the highway, and so it was easier to access the area, so people started to convert their summer homes into year-round homes. And they also built a lot of new kind of modern homes as well. So today, it's a middle-class neighborhood. There's no 2 houses alike, but each house is full of a character that's strongly influenced by living along the lake. And I'll pause here a minute just to talk about the photography for this project. the first thing you might probably notice is that all the pictures are kind of taken with the same composition, kind of looking between the houses towards the lake. So it's kind of a typology. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but now I do. So this kind of unusual point of view of shooting between the houses rather than the houses themselves, I think works for a couple reasons. First, it kind of puts a glimpse of the lake in the center of each of the photographs, so that, which is appropriate since the lake's the main character in the neighborhood to which everything else responds. And second, it gives just a glimpse of the houses and the yards. And these glimpses kind of bring out small details that make the comparison between the homes more evident. For example, in this home, you kind of, you see the bike versus the bird bath and the wood versus the brick. But they both have potted plants on the back, which seems to be a requirement of living here. Potted plants and hanging plants are just about in every house. And these glimpses, to me, even start to suggest the tastes or the habits or personalities of the people who live there who, we don't see. And so you start to make comparisons. For example, here, it's hard for me not to think about the difference in age of the people who live in these two different houses, or their different lifestyles and what they do to enjoy the beach. So these pictures actually become more than just documentary to me. They also become kind of social portraits of the neighborhood. If I'd taken separate pictures, like a realtor would take, of just the houses, then I think the whole house would kind of overwhelm the image, and you would kind of lose these details. And I don't think you'd make the same kind of comparisons or imaginings about who lives there. And actually, that's one of the things I really like about photography. I wasn't thinking about these things when I started this project, but it was discovered I was doing more than I thought I was doing, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll keep walking down the street here. Most of the houses have decks in the back with, furniture and chairs to be viewing and looking at the lake and eating out and that kind of thing. But I also noticed that a lot of the houses also have decks on the opposite side of the lake too, which was surprising at first. But I think the reason is that the lake's on the north side of this house, so it's shaded. And so if you want to sit out in the sun, then you have a patio on the south side of the house too. And so a lot of folks had this. And the other thing you notice is that a lot of homes have things associated with the constant breezes that come off the lake. So there's a weather vane up here. It might be a little hard to notice on the screen, but there's a wind chime here under the window. There's another wind chime over here. And although you'll see the flag, there's a big flagpole that you see. So there's a lot of adaptation, I guess, to the breezes along the lake, and people kind of celebrate that. Banners, and in the sense that birds, I guess, come in the breeze too. You see a lot of bird houses and bird feeders and that kind of thing. So the residents here really kind of celebrate the lake breezes in all kinds of ways. So the other thing I noticed walking around is gardens. All these houses have really beautiful gardens. And you kind of wonder if the neighbors lean over the fence and trade tomatoes for blooms here, or if they sneak out at night and steal a tomato from across the fence. I don't know. But you see a lot of the other hanging plants again. You see all the furniture in the back, bird feeders, fertilizer, little pump. So gardens are really kind of a big deal here. I'm not sure exactly what to make of this one. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's some kind of gardening one-upsmanship between these two neighbors, or if it's kind of maybe some kind of defensive gardening where you kind of build a fort around your house with your gardens. But and for some homes, the yard is the garden and the garden is the yard. Some others are more restrained, but still pretty elegant. Though all the residents have some kind of gardens, some folks put in a little less effort than others, I guess, but still they participate. I mentioned that, 100 years ago, people built summer homes along here. So this was kind of a recreation spot for Rochester, and still is, I guess, for many people, playground. And just like people built summer homes or summer cottages 100 years ago, parents still build summer playhouses for their kids. And kind of reflecting the diversity of styles in their neighborhoods, some of these summer playhouses for the kids are a little more modest than others. I think Lisette, if you want to, or Juliana said, if you want to ask questions along the way, feel free.
Yeah.
And they also build playhouses. Adults build playhouses for themselves as well, too, not just for their kids. The plots of land that these homes are on are pretty small, but even so, people find it kind of necessary to kind of delineate or define what's their space, what's their neighbor's space. So here they've done that with some natural landscaping. And if that's not enough, then nice white picket fence kind of says who's me and who's you. And apparently, if things get a little close, then, and it's easy to step over the boundary line, people need a little sturdier fence. In fact, old cliche is true that good fences make good neighbors. Then I think these are probably some really good neighbors. Everybody I stopped and talked to along Old Edgemere Drive when I was taking these pictures were really welcoming and inviting. In fact, one lady invited me, when she saw I was photographing, invited me back to her deck in the back, and we ended up talking for half an hour. And when I left, she said, if you ever photograph in here again and you want to come back and photograph on the deck, feel free. Even if we're not here, you're welcome to come out and hang out in our back deck here and everything. So people were really generous and nice, at least all the folks I met. So my lasting impression, I think, of this neighborhood is that people have a real kind of joy or a real rejoicing about living along the lake. This project was kind of a real turning point for me. Up until this was the first project large project that I ever did, where I had more than 4 or 5 pictures that worked together. And I found out I really liked doing that. So I've ever since have done mostly large projects, I guess. And secondly, before this project, I was shooting mostly natural landscapes, trees and rocks and beaches and things. So this is my first called urban landscape. And I found I was really fascinated by how people or how we construct the space around us, around our homes and shops, around our neighborhoods, around our towns. It's what we express ourselves through shaping our environment and what makes our life more interesting. I think about this as photographing the decorated environment, I guess. And so every project I've done since Edgemere has been something to do with photographing the decorated environment.
Is that a cutout of a woman or is that an actual person?
No, that's a cutout. It's a little wood cutout that they have along the beach there. I thought it was pretty cool. So that's my Edgemere project. The next one, it's a little bit different. I call this, this is the Windmills of Bliss, New York. So Bliss is a hamlet within the town of Eagle, New York, which is about 60 miles southwest of Rochester. And the population of Eagle is a small little town. It's about 1,200 people. And from driving around, I can tell you that the cow population is a lot greater than that. And due to the elevation and the prevailing winds here, it's the home of the Noble Bliss Wind Park. I'm going to say that again. It's such a cool name, the Noble Bliss Wind Park. Bliss, because that's the name of the little town that it's around, and Noble's the name of the company that operates these wind turbines. And these wind turbines are not like they're typically located all in one big patch of land. These are actually scattered over about 50 square miles, and they're sited in little clusters of 2 and 3 on land that's leased from the farmers, the family farmers there. And they get paid a little bit of money every year for the rent. And by the way, this is not the wind farm that you'll see driving down 390. That one's the Cohocton Dutch Hill wind farm. This Bliss Wind Park is about 50 miles west of there, so you can't see it from 390. This wind park opened up in 2008 with 67 of these turbines, and today there's like about over 150 turbines and additional wind farms that are around Bliss. I stumbled upon this wind farm driving around in rural areas. Like I say, there's really no big towns around there. It's pretty rural. And so I thought it'd be an interesting place to photograph, but I knew I didn't want to photograph it in the summer with green grass and fluffy clouds and blue sky. I thought the winter would be more interesting to photograph it because the snow and the overcast sky would kind of minimize the landscape and make these windmills look more alien than they kind of already are. These turbines to the tip of the top blade there are about 400 feet, which is taller than the Kodak Tower. It's about as tall as the Baal Shamam building if you include the spire on the top of the building. So they're pretty big. I tried to look up to see if there was any complaints from people, and the only article I really found was that Bliss residents have little to complain about, and the town supervisor said there was only 3 or 4 minor complaints about the sound of them. So I don't know how true that really is, but they really kind of dominate the landscape, but apparently people aren't too bothered by them. Farmers get paid rent for the land. The operating, there's no town taxes in the area because the operating company gives enough money that people don't have to pay taxes there anymore. So I guess the economic benefits outweigh everything else for them.
So there weren't statistics about dead birds everywhere?
No, I don't know. I didn't certainly see any. Actually, I did not see those birds there until after I got home and saw the picture. So I burned them in a little bit to see them, but they were kind of a surprise.
I love that aspect of this photo.
Being down there in the wintertime, I realized why they put the windmills down there. It really is windy. And I photographed these over a couple winters. And the winters I did it was cold. It was 2 degrees, 0 degrees when I was down there. So with the wind chill factor, it was like 25, 30 below. So I only got out of the car a few minutes at a time to take pictures. It was really brutal. And sometimes the whiteouts would be so bad I couldn't see past the hood of my car, so I'd end up having to stop there and wait until it cleared up a little bit. Fortunately, I never got stuck down there because almost every time I went down there, I never saw another car or truck or anything came by. So it would have been bad news to get stuck. I think the rest of these photos I'll go through kind of quietly. I don't really have a whole lot to add. So.
Some of these foggy, Steve, or is that blown snow?
It's blowing snow. Like I said, there was 20, 25 mile an hour winds, and this was one of the clearer views actually. sometimes, like I said, at one time it got so bad I had to stop for 5 or 10 minutes because I couldn't see past the hood of the car and didn't want to drive off the road. So. And there's a haze in the air too from the snow and the kind of a fog. Almost looks like it's a black and white photo, but that's all color. I was kind of in my minimalist period at the time. I think that's the last one of the windmills. So the last project, just to be a little different again, is I call dirt cart. So I've been taking urban landscape photos, kind of my decorated environment pictures for a while, but I never took any pictures with people in them. And after a while, it kind of bothered me because I was doing kind of these urban landscape photos, and it looked like I was photographing some, deserted towns like Chernobyl or something with no people. So I figured I wanted to get people in my pictures more. So I figured I needed to learn to take some portraits of people to get past my shyness or intimidation in doing that. So fast forward a few months, I again was driving around the rural areas south of Rochester like I do a few dozen times a year. And I came upon this dirt cart racetrack near Wellsville, New York, which is almost an hour, I think, south of Rochester. So I pulled in the parking lot to see what was going on there, what it was about. And the owner happened to be there, and he came over and spent about an hour giving me a tour of the place. He was still kind of building it, and but it's kind of interesting to talk to him. And so I thought that maybe this would be a place I could go down and take pictures of people, because it would be a lot less intimidating of doing it here than kind of strangers on a street in a small town somewhere. So I went down. In fact, I had such a good time at it, I went down 2 or 3 times. In fact, Eileen went down with me too, and kind of watched the races. So this didn't start out as a project. It just started out as an opportunity for me to maybe take some portrait pictures, but I had such a good time I went back and it turned into a project. So this is the first time I ever took any people pictures or portrait pictures. It's actually the first time I ever photographed an event, and I wasn't going out photographing houses and trees. So it was a lot of new things for me. So this is the track. It's called the Allegheny Memorial Speedway. It's a 10th mile banked dirt track. And I looked up, there's about a dozen or more dirt tracks like this for kart racing, all of them located in little rural towns around the state, but it's apparently very popular in these areas. So drivers can start racing at the age of 5. And I saw some drivers in their 60s who are still racing, but most of the people racing are probably between 8 and 18 years old. As you can tell from here, it's a real family activity. Each driver is there's accompanied by parents and siblings and lots of aunts and uncles, lots of grandparents, family and friends. It's a real family day event.
That image, Steve, almost looks like the person inside the car is like driving a Flintstone car, where their feet, it's probably the feet of the person behind, but it looks like there's feet down there.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whose foot that is. You can't really stick your foot through the bottom of the cart very well, I don't think. I don't know. The race day starts with families setting up shop in these trailers. This guy's in a trailer here that you can see. And fathers spend like hours tinkering on these cars and tuning them. In fact, I asked a couple of these fathers, is this sport for the kids or is it for the fathers? And they just kind of rolled their eyes and laughed. So fathers get as much enjoyment as, spend more time at it than the kids do, I think. You know, when you stop to think about it, how else would you carry 4 tires at once? This kid walked a long ways like that. He was probably walked 50 yards when I found him, and he walked all the way down around the bend carrying these. So, and how he gets like that is he picked up the 2 tires in his hands, and the guy he was getting it from, he lifted up his arms. The guy put the 2 tires under his arm, and off he went. So I don't know how else to do it. You can see along the back here on the side that the people have trailers with these tents set up in front of them, and all the carts on stands there that they work on. And this particular day, there was about, I think they said there were 200 carts racing. So this was a big statewide event. Kids get involved. You see a lot of proud fathers and their sons. You see a lot of proud fathers and their daughters too. There was actually a lot of girl drivers, more than 10%, maybe as much as 20% of the drivers were girls. You know, this guy's finger over here. So this guy was working on the car, and I walked up to him and asked if I could take his picture, and the girl wasn't there. And he says, "Oh, I'm all dirty and everything. You don't want my picture?" I said, "Well, it's all part of it. It's all part of working on it." I said, "Oh, okay, fine." He said, "Let me call my daughter over. This is her car." So he calls her over. And while she's coming over, he dips his finger in the grease and leans forward and says, "I'm going to have to dirty her up a bit." And so the girl comes over, so he's trying to paint the grease in her face, and they're jumping around and laughing. And he wisely decides not to go through with it, but just their laughing and kidding around, I think, really helps help the picture. You know, it kind of lightened it up, and plus, he leaves his finger there with the story behind it. This is a pretty typical kid driver, and it's a pretty typical, every time you point a camera at them, more than not, you get a thumbs up. It's kind of hard not to get them to do it. So before the racing starts, there's a driver's meeting where they discuss all the rules and the track conditions and everything. And there's 6 to 8 different classes that depend on the age of the driver and the weight of the car and everything. And each class has kind of 3 races. So 2 qualifying heats, and your position in your qualifying heat determines where your starting position is in the big feature, 15-lap feature race that they have at night. So there's probably at least 2 dozen or more races that they have during the day. So it gets kind of hectic. And so many races, you have to be on deck, ready for your heat. So this is on deck area, and it's crowded and noisy and dusty. It's a dirt track, so there's just like dust everywhere. I had the second time I went down, I made a big plastic bag to put over my camera because it keep it from getting so covered with dust. And you go home just covered filthy. So these are some typical sites near the starting line. On the left is the obvious start your engine moment where dads, and actually this is a granddad here in the front, starts the cart. And on the right, it's really hard not to get butt shots because that's just what you mostly see. But the thing I kind of notice here is that there's one driver, and I count at least 6 adults standing around him, I don't know, giving him advice, telling him what to do. That's really pretty typical. Like I said, the dads and granddads are as much involved in this as the kids are. This is kind of a cute portrait. A lot of these kids have these GoPros on their helmets to kind of film the race as they go around. So here's some last minute instructions from Dad. And a last minute touch up from Mom. And they're off. The guy here with the waving the flag is the owner, John Layfield. He's the guy that gave me the tour and was always really generous with his time with me. There are some grandstands that you can sit around here, but most people stand along the barricades here and watch the race from the barricades. Some wannabe drivers. It's obvious grandfather and his grandson. It's one of my favorite portraits from the day. It's hard to keep the little kids away. Her brother was the driver in the car that's just out of sight here. She would sit there next to him until it was time to go. Logan, the kid on the left here, he looks real serious, but I had spent about 20 minutes talking to him, and he was talkative and animated and laughing, but something apparently caught his attention over by the racetrack. This isn't a posed picture. He just suddenly got very attentive of something over there. So when I snapped the picture, he looks pretty serious. And this girl on the right, I just can't remember her name, but when I was walking around taking pictures, I was seeing her everywhere. It was just all over the place. So when I got around to where her trailer and her cart was, she happened to be there. So I asked if I could take a picture of her, and I did. So it was only after I took this picture that I found out that she has an identical twin sister who's also races. And that's why I was seeing them all over the place. And so just like any photographer, you're happy the pictures you get, but you always regret the ones you miss. And I missed not getting the two of those kids together. And I went back down 2 or 3 races after this one, always looking for the two of them, and I never saw them again. So there's always the one you miss, I really like the frazzled hair and the blue eye. A lot of blue eyes. It's amazing how many kids have blue eyes down there. Although this is another obvious, father-son picture. One of the little details I really like about this picture is the name, Chris Crane Jr. So it just, Chris Sr., Chris Jr. It just kind of builds on the whole father-son thing. I didn't notice that detail until I got home, but I really like that. It's interesting, you only see the eyes and the nose of this driver, but somehow you instantly know it's a girl. It's interesting how our brain works to that little bit of information that tells you that. Although somebody else told me that it's the way she's standing too. She said, boys never stand that way. Only girls stand that way. So maybe it's the posture too. But you can see how safety, they all have to wear these full face helmets. You can tell by this is all padding on the front here. They're fairly heavy padded suits that they wear. They have to wear gloves, high top shoes. It's a little hard to see, but there's a big foam collar that goes around their neck. So there's really, safety is a big deal. This guy, he works at the track. At the end of each race, there's an exit point just kind of right behind where he's standing. And as a car's exit, they have to go into this weighing station where they get weighed to make sure that they meet the specifications of the class. And this gentleman runs that weighing station. So he's usually back there. So this was one of the feature races near the end of the night. And so I was standing by these barricades taking some pictures. And so he walked over and talked for a couple minutes. He said, geez, he's in the weighing station all the time, so he doesn't get to see the races. So he thought he'd come over and watch for a bit. And he seemed to be taking pictures during the day. And he started to back up and say, oh, no, I'm probably getting in the way of your pictures. And I'm saying, no, 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 stay right where you are. And so I backed up a little bit because the light couldn't have been better.
Steve, I really like the as a black and white series, this works really, really well. And I could imagine with the dust being maybe of a particular tonal range of browns pervading every other image, maybe removing the color works really here. But, we had a darkroom club meeting in the past, and you'd shown the series of, or a few of the images that you had shot during the Rochester Twilight Criterium.
Right,
How the color and the movement there really worked. And I wonder if, was this set done before you were sort of experimenting a little bit more with the color? Because, you had talked earlier about, having focused a lot on black and white, or could you talk a little bit about what the color would have done if you had made any of these color or included any of them?
Yeah, so I still think of myself as a black and white photographer, and folks who have known me for a long time think of me as a black and white photographer. And almost every time I start a project, without exception, I always start it as a black and white project because I really love black and white. And I tend to see in black and white in that forms and shapes and everything. And it's usually partway through a series that I finally kind of decide it works better in color. And it turns out like a lot of the urban landscape ones I did, I always start them in black and white, but color is more real and black and white's more abstract. And most of the urban landscapes, reality is more important than the abstraction to me, I guess. So I always end up making them color because I want them to have more. It's the same reason I started to want to put people in them, because I didn't want them to feel like these abstract deserted cities. I wanted them to be more real and lifelike. So I ended up going to color. But I really like black and white a lot, and I always start shooting that way. But you're right, for these pictures, I never even hardly considered color. The black and white it works so well. As you said, everything's all kind of brown and the colors start to clash. And I love black and white so much anyway. It just seemed much more appropriate because it's more, the whole racetrack, it's more gritty feeling. So it just feels more, it feels more like being there. I think the colors would feel less like being there, I guess. I don't know, in terms of the mood.
I also like that it adds an elegance to something that's the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It does add a certain elegance to kind of a gritty, dusty day. Oh man, the first time I got home, I thought I ruined my camera. It was so covered with dust, and I was covered with dust, and man, it took me a day to get all the dust out of my lungs. It's really bad.
Elegance translates as respect, so I think that's a nice aspect of your work.
Oh, thank you.
Steve, would you talk for a moment about the camera? Because there's a question in the group chat about what you're shooting with and the lens, and you've mentioned a couple of times about protecting that camera. Tell us a little bit.
So yeah, I just started in photography as a hobby 10 or 12 years ago. And so I started with digital, and really the only darkroom stuff I do is with the photo club. I'd done a little bit of it back in high school days, but I didn't know anybody else who did it. I got a book out of the library, and there was a darkroom in school, so I played around there a little bit, but I didn't really get too far. So I started with digital because it was a lot easier to do, and I was very familiar with it. When I worked at Kodak, I worked for the first 10 years in the camera design of designing cameras. So I knew a lot about cameras and had access to digital cameras and stuff. So it just was very easy and natural for me. And I didn't have to, at the time I didn't know about the community darkroom, and I didn't have a darkroom, so it was easy. So I've always done digital. And I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark II, a nice SLR. More of a camera than I am it's more features in there than I ever use. But So yeah, does that answer the? So I mostly do digital. I've gotten pretty good at Photoshop now. And, you know, I mentioned I had taken a class from Bruno early on, and I took a couple of his classes early on. That's the only classes I've ever taken. And he was pretty much digital by then too. And he would always make the point that, in his opinion, digital is, over the last couple of years with the printing, has gotten pretty good. He felt he could do as good with digital, even better with digital than he could do with film photography. It's gotten that good over the years. So he was kind of steered me that way as well too. So, and being the engineering background, you know, Photoshop and everything was intimidating to me to learn how to use. The art of photography was more intimidating to me than the technology of it.
Are you actually shooting these in black and white, or are you shooting them in color and then transferring?
Well, so when you shoot digital, the raw files are all in color. So I would make them black and I set my viewfinder, or you know, the screen on the back, to be black and white, so I could see what the images were going to look like in black and white, because I knew I was going to be shooting these black and white. But yeah, you're right. You convert them, the raw files, after you get back. Yeah. I think they just have one or two more here. Yeah. So that's the announcing booth on the left. These announcers are good. I mean, they know a lot of the names of the kids in the car, so it makes it fun for the parents and friends watching them, because the kids' names are getting announced all the time, and who's trying to pass who and everything. And the guy on the right, the flag, I mean, so these races are going on for, I don't know, 8 hours or more. And so here's waving the checkered flags, but those aren't the only flags he waves. There's a flag you wave when you start the race. If there's an accident or a slowdown, the yellow flags comes out, he has to wave. And then when he starts up again, there's more flags. When there's one lap left to go, there's a certain color they wave. So this guy's doing this for like 8 hours. I don't know how he lifts his arms at the end of the day, because he's pretty active all day long. So these last feature races run under the lights. And so by the time the races are over and people are packing up and going home, it's 11:30 at night by the time people are leaving. So packing up their vans and going. So that's the end of Dirt Card and the end of the pictures I have to show. So I can get out of sharing here. If there any comments or questions or?
Beautiful work, Steve. I always really enjoy seeing your entire, like, the collection that you have so well curated, and then the story that you tell behind it. I'm really a fan, and it's like a goal to get to a point where you've got this really nice, concise body of work that works so well together.
Right. Like I said, after I took that series course in Bruno, I never knew what a body of work was. Those were all new terms to me. And I almost can't look at single images so much anymore. It's all of I really like how stories or images work together. Not necessarily make a story, but they play off of each other and they add to each other. I often kind of think that I don't take, wow single images so much. I mean, if some of them come out like that, fine. But I tend to take, I think, quieter images that kind of rely on the other images around them to build up, I guess. And that's what I like. So this is a nice opportunity for me today to not just, like in an exhibition in a gallery, you only can put up a handful of pictures. And it's really nice to be able to go through a whole set of them, because that's really what I care about more. So it's more what I try to do. So thanks.
I have a couple questions, Steve. First of all, I'd like to say I never knew you took snapshots of series. That's a class, I think the first class I took at the community darkroom, and it totally changed my life, changed my way of photographing, changed my way of thinking. So we have that in common. I'm happy.
Yeah, I was only taking pictures by about 6 months at that time, and I signed up for that course, and I'd never had any art classes or anything at all, and it was a little over my head, but not but enough that I could keep up.
Yeah.
And it had, like I said, it had a big influence on me. I really learned a lot. And now I mean, I see Bruno several times a month now. He's continued to be a real mentor to me and really has helped me learn how to print and take better pictures. So, yep.
I was wondering when you were showing Glimpsing Edgemere, and then for the rest of all the projects too, you're able to talk about some history of the place. How much research do you do while you're working on projects?
I do some. I tend to do it more towards the end of the project or after. For some reason, I don't know why. Like the windmills, for example, I probably looked up more of those things after I was done, towards the end of taking pictures, and I was starting to try to group them together. And like I say, I love making books, so I was starting to make a book. So I start to kind of do the research almost after the fact. That's not entirely true. The dirt cart thing, I kind of looked up ahead of time to see what it was all about, what was going on. But I tend to do it more in the middle or the end as I'm starting to try to pull the pictures together for some reason. It seems backwards to do it that way, but that's kind of what I end up doing.
Cool.
It's same with the neighborhood too, a lot, the Edgemere thing. Once you look into that neighborhood, actually it's really pretty fascinating that, there was resort areas on Manitou Beach there and the trolley and everything. And it's a really interesting area when you start. I should probably do more of that ahead of time.
Right, but then, it may inform the way you photograph. So I don't know, maybe hear about it, just your own experience and then learning more after.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so I was going to ask you if you encountered people while you were shooting the Edgemere project. And you talked about the lady who took you onto her deck and everything.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of that story. So, you're walking down this neighborhood, a single lane road, all these houses, and with a camera, and you kind of this older guy walking around. The lead went with me the very first time I was there, but I only took about a half a dozen pictures, but I went back other times. So I worry about when are they going to call the cops, because I'm shooting my camera at people's homes and stuff. So I'm walking down the street and so there's a bunch of guys working on a garage there, and they see me with the camera, so they're all tall. They assume I'm taking pictures of the birds. So I said, I took a bird picture. So yeah, I'm taking it. So they're telling me the eagle's nest and the hawks and everything in the area. So they leave and I start walking down, and there's a lady walking towards me, walking her dog, and she gets to me and she goes, "Oh, you're the guy photographing the birds." So somehow the news of me traveled down the street faster than I could, right? And she said, "Well, this is my house right here." So she's the one that invited me back, and I ended up talking to her for about a half an hour and come back again. So, and people were always, nobody called the cops on me. And in fact, though, I know there was one picture there. I don't know if you remember, I talked about parents building the playhouses for the kids, but they built their own playhouse. That house, when I was taking that picture, the guy who lived there drove up in the driveway behind me and stopped and rolled down his window. And I said, "Oh man, here we go." He goes, "Hey, if that turns out well, send me a copy. I could use one." And so people were always very nice. I never really had any bad experiences. But in fact, the lady, one more thing, the lady who on the back porch that took me to the back deck and everything, about, I don't know, almost a year later, Eileen and I were one of the Friday night gallery nights, and we were down at Hungerford, I think, or Anderson Alley, and we're walking down, and I hear this lady behind me hollering at me, running down, and it was the same lady. She recognized me, and she said, "I just wanted to say hi, I saw you here," and she was taking painting lessons and introduced me to her teacher, painter, and everything. So I've only ever had good experiences so far with meeting people.
Yeah. I was wondering too, I remember when you sent me a PDF of the dirt cart one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, Steve's really experienced with photographing people, and it's so amazing. And so it was shocking when you were like, that was my first time ever doing it. I just wanted to, get comfortable with it. So what's next? Are you into it? Is it now your new thing, or?
No, I did one other project. I went down to, I like going to the county fairs. So I've been going down to the small towns a lot, and I've been going to county fairs, and I did a little bunch of pictures taking the kids at the 4-H things, you know, sleeping with their cows and with their pigs and things. So I did a little series of that. Again, it was more to take pictures, but it's kind of easy to do kids in those situations. It's a whole way different thing to be out in a little town on the street and people. So I'm still really nervous about doing it. I usually take Eileen with me, so I'm not the creepy old guy taking pictures, because I have some other friends that go out, and that's what happens sometimes. You see the creepy old guy taking pictures. So Eileen, she's a foil for that. And I also say, if somebody comes running out, and this is expensive camera equipment, you need to step between me and them. And because this is expensive equipment, I don't want to get it broken, right? So she hasn't had to do that yet. So I don't know if she's up to it yet or not.
Because the images had such an ease about them to me. I don't know, people seemed really comfortable around you. And
Yeah, I'm in an environment there that it's easier to take pictures than if you're a stranger on the street. But even the few times I've tried it for, in stores or something, it's always been, people thank you after, it's funny, they thank me for taking their picture. So I've never had a bad experience. So, but nonetheless, I'm still rather timid about doing it. But I try to force myself to do it. I really like photo books like Alex Soth does, for example, where he combines landscapes and still lifes and portraits all in the same book. And I try to do that. I find that's far, far harder than it looks to get those things to all come together. I'm really struggling with that. So I'm still motivated to do it.
Can you show us your photo books again? Them all lined
Sure.
up.
Actually, I have them. I think I have them here in real. Maybe that's a better way to do it.
oh, that'd be neat. Yeah, show and tell. So are you working on anything now, Steve?
Yeah. Well, let me actually get the real photo books here. Unless there's one in particular you wanted to. So some of them are, I made some big ones. So this is a blurb one. These are expensive to do, but I really like this project a lot. And actually this Edgemere one, Bruno really liked this project a lot too. And he was a curator for the Spectrum Gallery for a while. He showed me one day, he said, I'm a curator for down, and he wanted me to do this at the gallery. So I had a solo show at the Spectrum Gallery with 30 of these images, that's the highlight of my exhibition thing. That was way cool. So I kind of made this big book for that. And then I've been making these smaller zines that I really like. These are MagCloud, magcloud.com. You can make one of these for usually under $10 for 60 pages. And I've been, for certain projects, these are kind of nice. There's my 4-H one that I did. Then I have some more blurb books of different, I don't know, bunch of. I don't know if there's something in particular you wanted to see or.
Oh, this is great. Thank you.
Here's my MagCloud also makes these spiral bound ones that are really nice because they're nice heavy pages and the printing is really, it's really nice. The black and whites have no color cast to them. They're really, for the price of them, they're really pretty good. So I have I don't know, there's a bunch of them here. I don't know if there's a specific question you had or.
Possible to flip through one of the zines.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I make these books, but I don't really ever show them to anybody.
We should have a bookshelf.
Yeah, it's like I'm not sure my nieces and my nephews and Mary's ever really seen any of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not like I'm hiding them. I just don't ever get them out. So this is one of the zines I did on Atlantic Avenue, kind of between where University and the East High there. that little 1 mile stretch there, I don't know, it just fascinates me. And people, why are you photographing there? It's kind of this grungy area, but there's houses, there's the train yards, there's factories, there's warehouses, there's a restaurant, I mean, it's just all in one little area. There's all this stuff. And to me, it's extremely photographic. So I spent about a year probably went there 40, 50 times just walking up and down that 1 mile. Although I took most of the pictures in that last quarter mile between the railroad bridge and the school. And so, let's see here. So I just put some of the.
Oh, cool.
And I like zines, you put them, and I ended up making, they're not exactly diptychs, I guess, but I liked the whole pairing of pictures kind of thing, and how they work together. And I like that they're vertical. I suppose if you shoot horizontally. So I was really trying to do things that worked. This whole idea of pairing pictures north and south was kind of new to me, and it really, they work totally differently than if you put them side by side. It's a whole different image. I had some single images there too, but so I don't know. The zines to me are a little more informal, and you can play around with this kind of stuff. And because it's a smaller book, you can change the orientation from side to side and up and down, and it doesn't get in the way. So I don't know. So that's. I really like doing these a lot. They're kind of fun. The whole process of editing pictures and pairing them together like that is this one went together fairly well. The ones you ask if I'm working on stuff now. The one I've been taking pictures of small towns. I used to drive by them and take pictures of the farmland and stuff, but I've been getting out and walking around for the last couple of years. And I broke one of my main rules. I figured if you want to make a coherent body of work, it starts before you kind of take the first picture by setting some constraints to a location or a certain shooting style or a certain subject. But when I started shooting around the small towns, I didn't constrain myself at all. I was shooting everything that I saw that I liked. So I have these pictures that are all over the place. And plus I wanted to put together landscapes and portraits, and it's just a mess kind of thing. It's chaotic, and I'm really struggling to how to put things together. But it's getting there. I've laid stuff out, and I start to figure out what I want to, little snippets of things that go together. So that's probably my big project now. That one, and the other project I'm kind of working on is, I've been shooting projects all the time. So every time I go out, I'm shooting for my certain project. And I never take just random spontaneous pictures. So I bought myself a little digital camera I try to carry around with me more and take spontaneous pictures. And I was influenced. I saw a book by, I don't know if you know, Jason Fulford is a photographer, and he comes these really odd kind of books, photo books, but sometimes he has text in them. So maybe I'll put text in it too. That'd be kind of interesting. So I started collecting quotes from things, but I was reading books that were kind of the same topics. So my quotes kind of hung together, but I had all these random pictures. So one day I started to get these random pictures and the quotes and started to put things together. And it was incredible how the pictures illustrated the quotes even. So somehow I was really interested in how you can make meaning out of something that has no meaning, right? These pictures had no meaning, but suddenly you can make all meaning out of them. I put together a prototype. I have to work on this. That's what this one is. This is more, this one's like closer to punk rock to me. And there were just all kind of random pictures and quotes and stuff, and that I was doing. And I really kind of like how it came out. It's way different from anything I've ever done before. I don't know. It's just so. Those are my two projects I'm working on now.
Well, thank you, Steve. That was great.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. It was really kind of fun to do. Like I say, it's fun to show a larger piece of work.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very nice work, Steve.
All right.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, August, Steve.